Welcome to the February monthly policy update brought to you by April Weather in DC. I got 2 o'clock right now. Let's give folks just another minute before we kick off. We're glad to have you with us. All right, your grace minute is up. Once again, welcome to the February monthly policy update. We're glad to have you joining us this afternoon. I'm Ben Kershaw. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Relations here at Independent Sector. For those of you joining us for the first time on an IS webinar, welcome. Independent Sector is a national membership organization representing a diverse set of nonprofits, foundations, and corporate giving programs working to ensure all people in the United States thrive. As part of our webinar feature, all lines are muted right now. We will pause periodically to ask for questions. Please type those in the Q&A box, or you can email publicpolicy@independentsector.org. The Q&A box is your best shot. This webinar will be recorded and posted on our website. It'll be emailed to you next week. Before we start, I want to respectfully acknowledge I'm joining you today from Washington, D.C., the ancestral home of the Piscataway people who are still in the area working to reclaim their land and their traditional practices. I also want to acknowledge that many of the buildings and places we inhabit in Washington, D.C. were built by enslaved people. Wherever you are joining us from, we're really glad to have you with us. These sorts of policy education events are historically a benefit for independent sector members only. For some time, we have opened them up to non-members as well to ensure that all the charitable sector has access to the latest policy information at this critical time. Next month will be the last monthly policy update that we will have open to non-members. We hope you will contact our membership team if you want to keep receiving these emails and these policy education events. So I'm joined today by Jessica Cameron and Wes Coulomb, our trusted partners at Washington Counsel Ernst & Young. I'm also joined by my intrepid government relations partner at Independent Sector, Ana Montanez. So thank you for being with us. As our regular viewers know, we often turn to Wes and to Jessica for the latest as they undoubtedly emerge from the Zoom where it happens on Capitol Hill. Before turning to them for updates on the current state of play, I want to start us back slightly more than a week ago when a major legislative text was released in the House of Representatives. This text is released by the House Budget Committee as a compilation of previous work that other committees have done on President Biden's American Rescue Plan. A few highlights that I want to bring out for you off the top. The number one highlight is that the independent sector team has dug through this 591-page document and analyzed it and posted a summary of provisions relevant to the nonprofit sector. We will drop that in the chat for you, and we'll include it as a link near the recording. So from this summary, a few key things stand out that our sector needs to know and be watching. One thing I would highlight is that there is expanded Paycheck Protection Program eligibility in this package. It is not what our sector has been asking for, but it's still a significant and hard-earned victory for nonprofits that operate in more than one physical location. So organizations that have 500 or more employees, but may not have more than 500 employees at any one location will now be able to access this critical lifeline. The package also includes substantial funding for state and local governments, which has also been a significant ask and a significant priority of the nonprofit sector. A few other things I would highlight are that this legislation in its amended form increases, only looking prospectively, the percentage of federal reimbursement for nonprofits that self-insure for the purposes of unemployment insurance. And the last thing that I would want to highlight from this summary before you dig into it on your own is that the package also makes major investments in civic and community infrastructure that independent sector and the nonprofit infrastructure investment advocacy group have been speaking out for, and which letter with 26 organizations just went to the Hill this morning in support of some of those priorities, which include funding for broadband access, funding for transit, funding for childcare in a few different forms, funding for arts and cultural institutions in a few different forms, support for the Corporation for National and Community Service, including its volunteer generation fund. So there are a few key civic infrastructure priorities in that bill as well. Like any important piece of legislation introduced on Capitol Hill, what we saw when it was introduced last week is not how it will look when it crosses the finish line. In fact, it is changing as we speak. So now I want to turn with that snapshot set to our friends at Washington Council to maybe provide us with any updates you can about what the path forward is for this legislation, and what this legislation might be looking like in the near future.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. I'll kick it off, and then Jessica can add some additional highlights and comments. We expect, as you've seen, the bill kind of move through the legislative process, first the committees, and now going to the House floor. The Rules Committee is going to meet tomorrow morning to consider a rule for the bill consideration on the House floor. There is a managed amendment from Budget Chairman Yarmouth, about 150 pages or so, to make some tweaks and changes to the bill, mostly to accommodate, I think, the reconciliation instructions. So when it gets to the Senate, it comports with the reconciliation instructions, so the Senate can then take it up with due speed. Expect then the House to have that. So the Rules Committee is going to meet tomorrow. They'll consider a rule. I expect the debate for the bill on the House floor to go into the weekend, potentially on Saturday, if they don't get it done tomorrow, and then pass the House. Obviously, as you know, the House margins are narrow, not as narrow as the Senate. So the Democrats have to keep their members in line. As you've seen from the debate, it's been a very partisan exercise with no Republicans supporting the packages through the committee process, and not expected to have them support it on the floor. So once it does pass the House, we expect it to go to the Senate, where it's going to bypass the committees. We expect Leader Schumer to bring the bill directly to the Senate floor. Under the rules of reconciliation, there is 20 hours of debate for the Senate to debate it. And then there is what is traditionally called a vote-a-rama, where the Republicans, in this case, will be offering lots of amendments to the package and try to force changes or tweaks to the bill as it moves through the Senate. That's going to be incumbent upon then Leader Schumer to keep his members together. I've already seen comments from folks like Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, who raised some concerns about the minimum wage increase in the package and other things that goes to the process. So we expect the Senate debate to be where a lot of interesting things are going to happen, and we'll see what happens at the end of that process. It could change as it goes from the House to the Senate as that process unfolds. I think there's been some conversations across the Capitol, but I think there is likely to be some changes in the Senate bill before it passes the Senate floor after that 20 hours of debate and the vote-a-rama. So that question then is, do they go to a conference committee on the bill between the House and the Senate, which could be convened very quickly, actually, or do they try to just work it out on the Senate floor, and then the House takes up and votes again the Senate passed version to get finally to the president's desk? So that's kind of how I see the process playing out. over the next several days, a week or so to go. They're trying to meet a deadline of March 14th, where the unemployment insurance expansions expire. That's obviously part of this package, as you mentioned with your summary. And so that will be the deadline they want to try to meet. I think they can meet that deadline. I think it's going to be tight potentially, depending on how it plays out in the Senate. But I think they can meet that deadline if they have some time to get it past the House this weekend, and then have the conversation and debate in the Senate. If they go to conference, it might delay a little bit, but they just the House takes the Senate version back up and passes that sent to the president, then it should be expedite the process. So, barring some unusual circumstance in the Senate, I think this is on track to make its way through the process to the House, the Senate, on the president's desk within the next several weeks. Jessica, I'm not sure if you want to add substance-wise or comments on process.
Thanks, Wes. Yeah, I think just to take a step back for a minute, when we look at how this year will play out, there's kind of two opportunities in Congress for major legislation to go through. The first is what Wes kind of and Ben and Anna kind of outlined earlier with the COVID relief package that's currently being debated and worked out in the House right now. And the hope is that the Senate will take that up very soon, with the expectation, or at least the hope, that it passes before that UI extension deadline in mid-March. The second big package that we anticipate is some type of infrastructure green energy package to occur sometime later in the year. Now, there's a lot of unanswered questions about kind of the size of this package, what will be in this package, but the hope is that it will include a lot of President Biden's campaign priorities that he talked about on the campaign, namely infrastructure investment, clean energy, green energy initiatives. But really, when you think about these two packages, that they're really two two separate shots that you can be up at bat, to use a sports reference, which I should probably not do. So when you look at that infrastructure package, the expectation is that it'll include other things besides just those types of topics, but really include Democratic priorities that they hope to get in. The reason why this is so important, and the last thing I'll say before turning it over to Ben, is that when you look down the pipeline, next year is 2022, which will be a midterm election year. At the moment, I think Republicans stand to potentially flip at least one of those chambers, possibly the House. And so as a result, you're not going to see as much legislative work there because members will be campaigning. But also after that, with Republicans in one of those chambers potentially in the majority, it means that Biden's priorities may not move over the finish line. And so that's the reason why these two, both the COVID relief package and the infrastructure package that potentially could come on later this year, are so important.
Thank you both. Thank you, Wes, and thank you, Jessica. So before we turn to kind of looking to the future, as Jessica so well put it, towards the second bill. Looking at the current bill, we've seen, you sketched out some of the potential procedural issues and policy changes around the minimum wage that could happen, either because Joe Manchin doesn't want it to happen, or because the parliamentarian doesn't think it can happen. Are there other things that the sector should be looking at in this House package as likely or particularly ripe for change as the bill moves through the process?
I don't think substantially or substantively we expect a lot of changes to the provisions I think the sector cares about in that. There was some amendments during the budget debate in the Senate regarding who was eligible for the tax credits and the extra rebates, right, requiring Social Security numbers and cutting out illegal immigrants. That could be another possible play in the Senate, and modification change that would just narrow the scope. There's also concern about the size of the income range that those payments go to. There was an amendment to limit that in the Senate. And so, if this process continues on the track of being very partisan, right, then it really comes down to what the 50 senators on the Democratic side, 48 plus 2 independents, and how they're going to vote on this, and if Schumer can keep them in line, because it doesn't appear that there are any Republicans, even as you saw earlier this month in January, a good effort by some Republicans, Senator Collins, Senator Romney, some moderate Republicans trying to engage with the president on a package. Obviously, they wanted something smaller than what is in the Biden plan and what's coming out of the House. I don't see them turning and coming on board this when it comes to the Senate. There are probably some conversations taking place on that, because I think that there's a desire by Senator Manchin and Sinema to not have this be a totally partisan exercise, although at this stage it may not be unavoidable at that point. So I see that there could be some smaller changes, but I don't see a wholesale or substantive changes to the package other than minimum wage piece is likely to come out in the Senate.
So you mentioned a desire for this to be bipartisan. This is something we've talked about in the past. So getting down to final prediction time, Washington Council, will any House Republicans vote for this package? I will note we have a question reminding us, maybe reminding anyone in Congress who's considering how to vote on it, that reportedly some 2/3 of the American public favor the major provisions in this package.
I'll let Jessica weigh in as well, but I don't see any Republican that I've heard thus far say I'm going to support this. So we'll see what comes down. But you certainly don't want to be the only Republican. So if there's a group of Republicans maybe to vote for it, that might be easier for them, unless you're in a really left-leaning state and you won as a Republican in that district. But as of now, I don't think there's going to be Republicans voting for it.
Yeah, I agree with Wes. I think that largely the communications that have come out of Republican members have been largely negative about the package. Now, I will say that there are a number of provisions in this bill that Republicans, when push came to shove, would support. But I think their concern is largely with the overall size of the package, as well as the fact that there are still some funds left over from previous, both the CARES Act, the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which was passed at the end of last year, funds that haven't been dispersed. Now, there's several reasons for that, but the main point here is that there's largely opposition, especially by House Republicans, to vote for it.
Thank you. And are we still, right? I know, right, Leader Hoyer has talked about a vote tomorrow on passing this bill. Rules isn't meeting until tomorrow. Are we still thinking Friday, or Wes, you thought this could slip to the weekend?
Yeah, I think there is a couple, or at least one bill they're trying to finish up tomorrow, other than this, and
Okay.
have other things on the agenda. And so given the timing of the Rules Committee markup at 9:30, finishes by 10:30, right? They have to go to the floor. I just don't, and the amount of people that want to debate and discuss this, I think that would be, maybe they try to make it and squeeze it in by late Friday night. But I would imagine it probably leaks into a weekend Saturday vote on this.
Thank you. I mean, why? Come on, it's only 600 pages, this one, right? How many hours do they need?
That's right.
And just right, so I noted 600 pages, and there's a 130 something page manager's amendment. Wes mentioned that some of the changes in that are to comply, with anticipated reconciliation process needs coming out of the Senate. A couple of things I would flag from that amendment. I think our summary mentioned that the bill is a work product of 9 committees in the House of Representatives. By my math, it's now the product of 12 committees. There's a piece from the House Science Committee, from the House Natural Resources Committee on a number of tribal programs, and from the Department of State, from the
Veterans as well.
And veterans. All right, so at least on the Department of State and USAID, there is some funding in there that's certainly relevant to, to some segment of the significant segment of the nonprofit sector working to combat this virus beyond our shores. So potentially a good development for that work there. I want to turn now to to what Jessica again I think telegraphed and sketched out for us well. If they pass this bill on March 14th, right, I think we know that attention may immediately turn to what else they could get done through a Build Back Better process. Is that going to start on March 15th? Are they going to maybe take a week off for St. Patrick's Day, or are they going to pick this up in May? As the sector thinks about when our top opportunities for input are, your thoughts on timing for that package, I think would be really interesting.
Yeah, I think we're going to have President Biden give his not State of the Union address, but an address to Congress that usually accompanies the first couple months of the new presidency. I think that's expected to take place sometime towards the end of March. And so I imagine it'll be after this bill passes, and they can tout the passage and enactment of this bill. And then the speech will be about looking ahead for his broader agenda, as you mentioned, the Build Back Better and further that agenda going forward in that speech. And so I'd imagine, and then also the president will put forth a full budget, but given coming in, he'll put out his new budget plan around that same time. And so that'll kind of be the kickoff, if you will, for the next phase of legislation. As Jessica mentioned, they have to pass another budget resolution, similar to what they passed before, to give them reconciliation instructions to lay out the budget for the next several fiscal years for FY22 and going forward. And that's, usually takes place in the March-April timeframe. I can see it slipping until May potentially, depending on how quickly they want to get the process going. The infrastructure legislation has generally been bipartisan in years past. And so Democrats need to decide how they want to process this next package. Do they want to follow the process of the ARA plan? Is it just going to pass in the House and do it on a partisan basis? Or do they want to work on a bipartisan basis out of the gate and see if they can put together a number of Republican votes in the House and Senate for a package? That'll obviously depend on the substance and the size, but there is more willingness among Republicans to work on this package going forward. And so the question will be is what kind of process do they put forth? I would imagine they'll want to do a budget and have reconciliation instructions in that budget just to give them a backstop or a plan B if the bipartisan negotiations break down and they don't get anything, because we've seen that in years past. So they've negotiated something and then they've broken apart and then they've taken a more partisan track. So I would imagine that would take place sometime in the April, May timeframe, and then we're going to negotiate this out in the next couple months after that and see how it goes. But like I said, it could be a bipartisan process, and that could be a large bill. There's also going to be, I think, more pressure to pay for some of it, rather than like this bill where it's just pretty much unpaid for, $1.9 trillion unpaid for. There'll be some pressure to pay for some of that, and so that's where you see potentially the Democrats wanting to raise taxes like they promised in their campaigns. Either on corporations, wealthy individuals, et cetera. And that could be a point of contention where the Republicans and Democrats break apart on the package of negotiations. Jessica, anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are obviously some big policy questions still open as far as what that package looks like and how to move forward with it. I think that, maybe a good analogy is that, like any good home renovation project, if any of you are doing those during the pandemic, you might have a set timeline of when you want to complete the project and then work backwards from there. There have been talks of potentially, end of summer, early fall that this could be accomplished. But like any good home renovation project, that things always hit snags. And unlike the current COVID relief package, I think this infrastructure package is definitely a bigger lift, right? For this current COVID relief package, we're largely extending programs from the CARES Act and from other provisions, adding funding where needed. Whereas this infrastructure package will really be kind of brand new spending on, a variety of different projects.
Thank you, Jessica. And Wes, thank you. So let's pause, give folks another chance to submit questions about what you've heard on the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 as it moves through the process, or about what I think we can assume is going to be called the Build Back Better Act of 2021. You can drop those in the chat. While folks are thinking about that, I have one question for Washington Council before we turn to some other very important updates. You mentioned a desire at some level to pay for portions of what ultimately becomes the second major potential reconciliation package, absent a bipartisan deal. One thing that certainly sets off our sector's alarm bell is candidate Biden's proposal to cap the value of all itemized deductions, including the charitable deduction, at 28%. Presumably that would also be included in a Biden budget. Have we heard anything? Do we have any sense about when a Biden budget would be coming out? Right, late February is sort of in line with when the first Obama budget came out. I think the Trump skinny budget came out somewhere around this time frame too.
Yeah, I don't know if they've given a exact time frame. I just know it's been delayed. I'd imagine they'll probably want to put it out after they pass this next this bill, and around the time when he's giving his address to Congress towards the end of March. So I imagine that middle to end part of that latter part of March is when we'll see. Most of it could be before then, but they already passed the statutory deadline of first Monday in February. That's not really no penalty for that. And we should see additional details of that come out. Like, for example, for the tax portion of the budget, the Treasury Department does a green book, which kind of summarizes all the tax provisions in the president's budget. In years past, President Trump did not do that, but President Obama did. And so you can go back and look at what his Treasury Department did. And currently his Treasury Department, or Biden's Treasury Department personnel, are several people who worked for the Obama administration. So I imagine they'll put out a green book sometime in the April-May timeframe to kind of lay out the details of that proposal. Like you mentioned on that piece, there will be a number of revenue raisers, tax increases, if you will, in the president's budget to help pay for some of the things they're proposing going forward. They could find their way in the next bill, as Jessica points out. So something to be mindful of and to watch as it comes. Just because it's in the president's budget doesn't mean it's going to be acted into law. There's a whole list of things that Obama put out that never made it. But obviously, he only had a Democrat-controlled House and Senate for a short period of time, his first part of his tenure. So they have a better chance with President Biden with control of the House and the Senate right now to pass some of the things they want to do. So we'll look for how it comes out. My sense is probably the budget, the speech will be sometime, middle to end of March, and then see more details come out the weeks after that.
Great, thank you. We have some questions coming in the chat, and I want to turn back to those after we cover some other critical updates that are beyond what we've been talking about up until now. So I want to turn to Ana Montanez on the IS staff for those updates. Thanks, Ana.
Thank you, Ben. Well, yes, I will provide some other legislative updates that have happened during this month, very hectic month. And so on February 15, Representative Chris Smith and Henry Cuellar reintroduced the Charitable Giving Tax Deduction Act, referenced as HR 1081, which would create a universal charitable deduction above the line that would allow all taxpayers to take the deduction despite if they itemize their taxes or not. Representative Smith and Cuellar introduced this bill last Congress, and they've been very supportive of expanding the charitable deduction. This builds on, of course, on the $300 charitable deduction established by the CARES Act, and then at the $600 for married couples that file jointly at the end of the year-end package. We're very happy to see this. And so we hope to continue working with the representatives in trying to drive this across the finish line. There's also the reintroduction of the Legacy IRA Act. This happened at the beginning of the month. Senators Kevin Cramer and David Stabenow reintroduced the Legacy IRA Act that would increase the tax incentive age of retirement age for Americans to give to charity. The senators had also introduced this bill the past Congress, but just to refresh your minds as to what the Legacy IRA Act does, it's like it basically gives middle-income seniors more flexibility to make their gifts to charities through their individual retirement accounts. This would also expand the IRA charitable rollover by allowing seniors age 65 and over to give up to $400,000 annually tax-free to an annuity held by the charity of their choice. We know that nonprofits right now, because of the pandemic, are taking more than what they are receiving on revenue stream, and this would be, if enacted this Congress, this would be another great area where nonprofits would be supported, of course. And last but not least, I want to bring your attention to a letter that Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and Elizabeth Warren wrote addressed to Treasury Secretary Yellen, saying mostly that there are some tax exemptions granted by the IRS that are being exploited by some nonprofit organizations that are kind of like indistinguishable from political action committees. This oversight action that we're seeing from these two senators that sit in the Senate Finance Committee, it's very important because since what happened in the Capitol, the January 6th, also Senator Wyden has been trying to press the IRS to be more transparent and to increase disclosure requirements from donors that of course donate to nonprofit organizations. So this is something that we will continue to look up, but I mean, it's important that we know that the committee certainly putting the eye into the tax exempt organizations. Thank you, Ben.
Thank you, Anna. Yeah, lots of potential opportunity in the charitable giving space, right? Both on the charitable deduction and the retirement space, and lots of interest in proper oversight of our sector. Certainly an issue we all need to take seriously. So thank you again, Anna. As I look at the questions we have submitted, I want to turn to some of these. Some of these take us back to our previous discussion. But if people have questions about some of the oversight efforts we're seeing, particularly in the Senate Finance Committee, about the Legacy IRA Act, or about the Charitable Giving Tax Deduction Act and our efforts to expand the charitable deduction, please do submit those into the Q&A. We have a question from our friend Mark Turner in Colorado. Glad to have you with us, Mark, about opportunity for improvements to the rescue plan as it works its way through Congress. Mark, I would say, taking this one, that the letter from over 3,000 now nonprofits around the country that represents some of the sector's core asks. In the area of charitable giving, we haven't seen a whole lot of progress on that front in this bill. I think you're hearing that a lot of the legislative advocacy on that issue is looking towards future bills, partially because, as Anna noted, we had a small but significant victory on that area at the end of last year. With regards to the Paycheck Protection Program, I think the guidance that we've certainly heard from Senate side staff is that they were involved in drafting some of the House language, and I think that they were involved because I don't think they felt like they had a guarantee that they would get a chance to fully reopen and rework the language there once it came over to the Senate. As you're hearing from Washington Council, they're under a lot of pressure not to reopen things if they don't need to be reopened in order to get 51 votes. So, I think there's some opportunity in the PPP space. An area of particular potential opportunity, continued opportunity, lies in unemployment insurance reimbursement. We saw, there weren't a whole lot of substantive changes made during the committee markups, but the fact that a substantive change was made to unemployment insurance reimbursement in the House Ways and Means Committee, I think really indicates that lawmakers are hearing from nonprofits they represent who have big bills for unemployment insurance and are in need of some pretty urgent cash flow relief. So that's an area where I think there's opportunity for us, and where I know that the independent sector and others have been talking to Senate Finance Committee members, reaching out to, maybe talking to is a bit generous for what we've been hearing back lately. There's some busy folks at the moment. So I think the really short answer, especially if you're in Colorado, and your Senator Bennett is on the Finance Committee. I know you guys are only down to one member of the Finance Committee in the Colorado delegation. Sorry about that. I think him hearing about unemployment insurance reimbursement, particularly making the 50 to 75% increase retroactive, is among the fruit that may be reachable. I don't know whether it's low hanging, but it may be reachable. I think I'm picking up my affinity for metaphors today from Jessica. Thanks for that, Jessica. So I also want to, we had a question about whether there are any provisions expanding 211 in the bill. That is a priority of the Nonprofit Infrastructure Investment Advocacy Group. We have not seen anything along those lines in this package. And unless I see a lot of burning interest from my fellow speakers here, I'm not sure that we're hearing that issue is likely to advance at the moment. Certainly something that I think we may have a chance to push for as we all fight for civic infrastructure in that next package. Is there anything else that people wanted to add on that one? Not seeing any.
Just to add that reconciliation is an interesting vehicle. It gives the majority party the possibility to pass the legislation through on a simple majority vote in the Senate without the minority party, in this case Republicans, blocking the package, but it also has restrictions and limits on what you can put in that package. And so provisions that don't have a budget impact, they don't spend money or raise revenue or cut spending or cut revenue, will get taken out of the package. And so you can't have administrative provisions in there or things that don't have a budget effect. So new programs, that kind of thing, are hard to do in reconciliation. And so that's one of the reasons why some of the things you see in here, Jessica points out, just kind of adding money to current programs without building on new programs. So that's going to be an issue with the bill, the reconciliation the second time on infrastructure, how they're going to thread that needle in creating new programs, expand, green energy programs, for example, other things in the reconciliation instructions to meet that strict rule on things must have a budget impact provision, or it's going to be taken out.
It's a good point. So potentially something to look for in the in the annual appropriations process as well. Speaking of appropriations, we're hearing rumbles, much more than rumbles, out of the House about a return of earmarks. I think the nonprofit sector always had a complicated relationship with earmarks in the past. The fact that the new guidance around earmarks in the appropriations process seems to be saying that they're only only going to be for nonprofits and governmental entities, not for for-profit entities. I'll say just from where I sit, that feels like a potentially positive development. I also think it opens up more need for oversight of what is a nonprofit, potentially coming from some of our other friends in Congress. So Wes, Jessica, Anna, right? The House Dems have kind of made clear what they want to do. They're certainly influential in the appropriations process, but there's a lot of other people who have a say. How do you think that earmarks status is going to shake out for FY22 appropriations?
That's a good question. And the earmark issue is not necessarily a Democrats versus Republicans issue. You have both Democrats and Republicans who support reinstating earmarks, mostly the appropriators, because it's good for them to be able to direct money to their home state. But you also have a number of Democrats and Republicans who oppose it. So I think, as you've seen that the House Democratic leadership has signaled they want to bring them back in a limited, more targeted way. And we'll see how that plays out. I think they probably will come back with some very, rules around how to do that, since it's been out for such a long time. We'll see how that plays out. But like I said, it's not a strictly partisan issue. There's probably more Republicans that oppose it than Democrats, but it's not strictly a partisan issue.
Thank you. There's a question from our friend, certainly my friend, Jeanette Thomas at the Association of Children's Museums, about whether we're going to see IRS instructions on the expanded ERTC from December. We're certainly, if Wes, Jessica, Anna, if you have an answer to that, certainly all ears. Otherwise, happy to stay in touch with Jeanette about whether we see anything or whether we expect anything shortly. Anything you all know on that?
I can ask some of my folks that might have some insights on the IRS people drafting those, but I haven't seen anything yet come out to build upon what they did last year. As you know, in the current bill, it's going to extend that program out for another 2 quarters. And so it'll broaden that program. I would imagine they're trying to work on that, get it out. But I've not seen anything yet. I'm not sure when it will be coming out. Obviously, there's some changeover in the administration that, not a lot IRS, but in Treasury to have to approve some of that guidance in the building. So I'm trying to get it out as soon as possible, but I haven't seen anything yet.
Thank you. And what I would also add is that if there are particular things that children's museums or that other nonprofits are looking for out of that guidance, we would love to hear about it, so that we can know about it, and so that we can raise it as appropriate with the administration. The other thing I would note on the question about earmarks, I neglected to mention that the second package, as we've been referring to it, will probably have a significant jurisdictional role in the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, at least in the House. And the chairman of that committee, Peter DeFazio, has indicated that he intends to pursue member-directed projects within his committee this year. So I think that's also something that I would suggest watching throughout the process. Really appreciate all the questions today. I'm glad everyone is appropriately caffeinated, or that the sunshine is waking people up. I have a, one final question before we close, which is about, whether there will be specific legislation this spring to, support minority communities and populations. I think there are a lot of directions that this policy area could go. Right, commitment to racial equity and policy is something I know that IS takes really seriously and that we're thinking a lot about. I would flag for Edward that the work of the nonprofit infrastructure investment advocacy group is work that we seek to advance through a racial equity policy lens. Also, I think there's a very clear electoral mandate for this administration to pursue policies that help out some of the folks who are a major reason why they're in the White House. We've heard kind of both the idealistic and the very pragmatic reasons for them to weigh in. So, do we think, Washington Council, any sense of how that lens and direct assistance to marginalized communities might play into the second package or into the rest of the year legislatively?
Yeah, I think this administration will have a focus on, they've already seen from their executive orders coming out. And in this package, right, there's more targeted funds, those groups and parts of the country. I think that will be also a focus of the next package, as you point out. I don't have anything to report in, specifically as a package or proposal, but I think it will kind of be overarching in the various things they put out, whether it's appropriations or infrastructure or the highway spending, other things like that, as they put in their next package going forward.
Thank you. And thank you for the question, important issue. I want to give people one last moment to submit questions. I want to thank you all for your ongoing work. Such a wide range of critical issues for the nonprofit sector right now. There are some months when we think about planning for this webinar and we're not totally confident what we're going to talk about. This was not one of those months, and I'm not sure I expect any of those months in the near future. Thank you again, Wes, Jessica. Thank you, Anna. Thank you to all of you for being with us this afternoon. We look forward to working with you in the hours, days, and months to come. Have a good afternoon.